All right, we're back with another edition of Recruiter Fuel. And this topic is going to be a little bit different. I mean, the whole premise behind Recruiter Fuel has been talking to those in the industry about the industry. And although, Ian, you've been on the show once before, twice before, we're going to take a little different tack because we're not talking about your expertise about the industry necessarily. So we're taking a different stance on this, and this is about recruiting veterans. And Ian, you're a veteran.
Yes.
Thank you, first of all, for your service.
I appreciate it.
But this is an interesting dialogue, because you and I have had the dialogue around veterans can't really find the right job when they get out of the service. And I'm going to ask you to tell a little bit about your story here in a second. But on the flip side of that, I talk to employers all day long that are like, we can't find enough veterans. So it seems like there's this ongoing disconnect between both sides. So let's first start with you. Give a little bit about your background, your military background, and what happened after you got out of the service.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in the United States Army. I was in for 4 years. And in that time, I had done many different things, as you guys can imagine.
Sure. You were deployed.
Yes. And over those times, I went through the Honor Guard. I went through all these different things. And as you start to get out, or as you start to transition, you start to realize it's a lot harder to find a job.
When did you actually have to start thinking about the transition out? Because you can't just like get out one day, I hope, and say, oh crap, I don't have a job.
Right.
When does that discussion come up?
Now, it comes up in when you're about a year out.
Okay.
So you're making a decision. Do you want to stay in? Do you want to re-enlist? What do you want to do? And then after that, you kind of go into the stage of, okay, I'm going to get out. What am I going to do?
What comes next?
Because your whole life is really turning upside down.
Sure.
I mean, you're away for many years where you're not around your family as much. So like coming back to your family is one thing. But then trying to find a job, it gets a little nerve-wracking.
Why? Why is there, that's the rub here, right? Why is there such a disconnect when employers are saying, I want to hire vets, and yet vets are saying, I can't really get a job?
Well, I think it's kind of a mix, because a veteran comes out thinking that they don't really have much to offer, because what do you hear these days? Education is one of the most important things like that. So you're coming out and you're like, okay, I'm already at a disadvantage.
Formal education, because you're getting
Right.
educated when you're in the military.
Correct.
But it's a different type of education,
Right.
potentially. Okay.
So I'm not showing a degree
Yeah.
when I get out.
Sure.
But something that I will show, or something that I can show, is like leadership or things like that you kind of get that in-life experience. However, putting leadership on a resume, what does that mean to the civilian, or how does that look? Now that I'm out, I can kind of see it a little bit more, but when I was in, I definitely couldn't.
So it was really the understanding of you've learned X in the military, it applies to business this way, but you coming out of the military, you didn't understand that, and I'm assuming most employers that you spoke with when you first got out, they didn't understand how it transfers over?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the other thing is like, I kind of jumped on the first opportunity as soon as somebody offered me a job, because I was nervous about getting out and not having income.
Oh.
So
Which may not be the right job.
Correct.
Okay. Do you see that happening a lot?
Yeah, a lot.
Okay.
And it's because there's no education around it. I mean,
Around what to do once you get out.
they try to provide it, but you get these people that they have the mindset of, I'm getting out. So the education portion might be there, but it's not really in a format that makes sense to the veterans.
Got it.
And then on top of that, the veterans don't really know where to go to look for jobs.
So what did you learn that first job you took just for the sake of taking it? Let's kind of start there. What did you learn from that experience that you could relate to employers or relate to other veterans that are either getting out or will be getting out in the next year or so?
One of the biggest things I learned about starting my career was that I just work harder than everybody else. I'll put in extra hours when I didn't need to, and it just kind of showed you different values that I have, even though it's not necessarily on a piece of paper.
Okay, now take that one piece. Sorry to interrupt, but take that one piece. It's one of the biggest complaints of employers these days is finding people who actually want to work. Yet you already had this natural affinity towards it.
Yeah, and my biggest thing, and the biggest thing that ever sold me was growth.
Okay.
So the only thing I ever want was to continue to grow, because I never want to be stagnant.
Okay.
So that's always been something on my side, and that's something that you learn in the military.
Sure.
That just like going up through ranks, you never want to stay stagnant.
Right.
So moving up through the ranks is one way. Now getting out, you have to do the same thing.
Okay.
You have to figure out a way to move forward.
How do you keep pushing that?
Right.
That's right. So this ongoing disconnect between the two sides, as we've talked about, which you've actually experienced. I mean, how do we start to tear down those walls in between the two? I hate to call it two sides because we're all on one side, but using that kind of that metaphor, right? How do we start to bring the veterans that are coming out, the businesses that are looking to veterans, how do we bring them together faster or sooner?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is we need to find a demand on the work side because everybody says that they want to hire veterans, but what kind of veterans do you want? Do you want
What do
the
you mean?
guy, when it comes down to their education portion or it comes down to what did they do in the military? Do you want people that have deployed? Do you want people that have, combat experience? Do you want people that, and when I say like combat experience, you have combat jobs and then you have people that support the combat jobs. So really what you're looking for within the military system.
Well, let me ask you this question, because even I don't know completely. So the experience from being in combat or combat support, how does that transfer over to the business world? Because I'd be willing to bet people that are watching me right now and watching you talk about this, they're hearing you say combat jobs and they're like, well, we're civilians. Why do I need somebody who's been in combat? You've been in combat, you're here, but where's the transfer?
Because really it comes down to teamwork.
Okay.
So for me, I always looked at it as, okay, if you go to combat or things like that, you have to figure out a way to survive, support other people around you, because it is a mental thing as much as it is a physical thing over there.
Sure.
Because, I mean, you can look at, okay, I'm at a fob that is the size of a football field for months.
A fob.
Yeah. A fob is just small quarters to live at when you're overseas.
Sure.
So kind of like a campsite.
Yep.
If you will.
Just for the people that didn't understand it.
Yeah, not a problem. And my thoughts behind it is you get teamwork, you get experience when it comes to seeing how other people react over time. So when you're sitting at a new job or things like that, you can tell when somebody's having a stressful day, maybe just talk to them. So there's different components that come into what a veteran does and how they react to people.
So teamwork, being able to read other people. I mean, the list probably goes on and on and on.
Right.
Now, one of the things that we talked about a couple of weeks ago is getting to the vets sooner from the business side, actually getting to where they are, potentially even where they're currently deployed.
Right.
How would that work? How can employers theoretically, it doesn't exist today, but how could they get more involved sooner in the life of a veteran or soon-to-be veteran?
That's kind of the hard question.
Yeah.
Because, for me, you can look at it as when you're getting out, when that year span that we talked about earlier, they call this program ACAP. And the ACAP is to assist you getting out, help you with XYZ when it comes to getting out. So finances. What kind of finances do you think you're going to need once you get out? Because once you get out, you're not having the same finance that you had before.
Right.
So I would say to a certain extent, it kind of just scares you. It gives you that, kick in the butt, like,
What am I doing when I get out?
You're about to get out. And it
Sure.
kind of, I've seen it where people have said, I'm getting out. And then it comes around, they start going through these classes, they're like, I'm not getting out.
Yeah, I'm comfortable.
Like, I'm comfortable with, I get my paycheck every 2 weeks.
Sure.
I don't have to worry if it's going to fluctuate. I don't have to worry about my housing stuff. That's all set up. I got this life that I'm just trying to live.
Yep.
And now they're like, yeah, I got to stay. And it's like, no, that's not. If you want to get out, you should be able to get out, but you should have the understanding of, if I get out, there's going to be changes, but there should be things around it.
But somehow the employer's got to get involved sooner.
Right.
Don't not wait till somebody like you is gone, it gets out, is gone.
Right.
Somehow and I don't know that we have the answer for it today, but somehow we've got to get connected to you guys before you gals before you actually get out.
Correct.
So one other question, then we'll end it. But from a recruiter's perspective, recruiters that have never been in the military, that maybe don't understand the teamwork aspect or some of these other pieces, what's a couple of pieces of advice you'd give to an actual recruiter now that you've been in our industry for a couple of years?
I would say look at their resume and read it, but a lot of them are putting it out there because the way that they teach it in the military is like kind of leave it brief. That way they can kind of call you and have that conversation.
Yeah.
So if you're reading something that you see from a veteran that says, "Oh, I got leadership skill," call them and ask them what that leadership is.
Ah.
Because the way they teach it is, yeah, I have leadership skill. Everybody can say they have leadership.
Sure.
What did you do to be a leader?
Dig in a little bit more.
So for me, I had a leadership role
Okay.
when I was in the honor guard. So for me, I was a corporal, which is a E4, pretty, middle of the road,
Yeah.
filling an E7 position, which
Big difference.
huge difference. But putting leadership on there and you and I not having a conversation, you'd have no idea.
That's right.
So it's really different opportunities that everybody has in the military to show leadership. No matter what, they're going to have some sort of leadership. They will have somebody under them at some point. But what did they do in that time?
So number one, you're kind of trained to be brief.
Right.
So for the recruiter's perspective, don't take that as they didn't put enough information. Take that as that's the way you guys are trained. So ask the question, dig in a little bit deeper.
Right.
What's one other bit of advice, whether it's to the recruiter themselves that's calling you or the hiring manager, to understand where veterans are as they're getting out, to better understand how some of those skills are transferable? What's the other piece of advice you'd give?
I'd say be a little patient.
Okay.
The reason I say that is obviously they're making a huge transition. So they're coming from not being around their family to coming back to their family, coming to areas that they might not have seen before or industries that they have not worked in before. So you could hire somebody and they can work in a certain position, put in more hours, put in more effort than anybody else, but it might not just come as fast as other people because they might have been educated around it a little bit more. So give them that time. If they're putting in the effort, they're putting in the hours, they're putting in anything that they can to show that they have some value when it comes to work ethic.
Work with them better. Provide them a little more guidance. Be patient with the way they come across.
Absolutely.
That's great. Ian, again, thank you for having the conversation. Thank you for the service. As you know, this is something you and I have been talking about, is there something that we can create even here at Qualigence to better marry the two together? And it's some additional dialogue that we'll have with you and others that are in the industry. But listen, to everybody that's focused on military recruiting or veteran recruiting, definitely take some of what Ian said to heart, because you're the living, breathing proof of all the things you just described, including this last piece around the patience and everything else, and it's come along, and you've learned a new industry outside of where you've been. So again, thank you for your time. Guys, make sure you check back. In the future, we'll have more discussion around this whole idea of veteran recruiting, because it's a huge need out there. And as always, if you've got a topic that you want to have a discussion about, click the button below. The link will take you to where you can fill out. You want to be a guest on the show, you have a topic you want to discuss, and then you and I will have the opportunity to chat prior. Until we see you guys next time.